When I opened the audit file that morning, I didn't realize I was signing my boss's disappearance warrant. That line still haunts me. My name's Daniel Reyes, Senior Financial Analyst at HavenTech Solutions, a sleek software firm that preaches transparency and innovation. Two words that mean absolutely nothing behind closed doors. I've always been the rule-follower type. Numbers are my comfort zone, clean, logical, and brutally honest. My father taught me that integrity isn't something you rent. You own it or you don't. Maybe that's why I'd rather lose a job than fake a spreadsheet. My boss, Clara Monroe, the CFO, was the opposite of me in every way. Confident, charming, impossible not to admire. She was the kind of leader who remembered birthdays, stayed late to help with reports, and somehow made corporate compliance sound glamorous. Everyone loved her, including me. When she took me under her wing 2 years ago, it felt like mentorship mixed with destiny. "You've got potential, Daniel," she'd say, handing me a latte during late-night audits. "You just need to stop worrying about every little decimal. Sometimes success requires flexibility." I laughed it off back then. Flexibility. That was her favorite word. Everything was normal until last quarter's audit. HavenTech had just closed a massive investment deal, $20 million in new funding. Clara called me into her glass-walled office, sunlight bouncing off her designer pen as she slid a USB drive across the desk. "Preliminary audit data," she said casually. "Just align the numbers with last quarter's narrative before the board meeting. No surprises." It sounded routine, but something in her tone, the way her smile didn't reach her eyes, made my stomach knot. I didn't think much of it until I opened the files that night. The discrepancies were obvious. Millions shifted between departments like ghosts. Expenses buried under vague project codes. And at the center of it all, a research partner account I'd never seen before, draining cash in steady increments. I stared at the screen for hours, the hum of the fluorescent lights growing louder. The next morning, Clara greeted me like nothing was wrong. "Everything good with the data?" she asked, handing me another latte. The same brand. The same warmth. But this time, her eyes flicked to the USB drive in my hand, just for a second. And in that second, I saw it, a glint of something I couldn't name. Fear. Guilt. Calculation. Whatever it was, it told me one thing. Something was about to go very, very wrong. I told myself it was nothing. A rounding error, a mislabeled transaction, maybe a system glitch. After all, Clara never made mistakes. But that night, as I sat in my apartment surrounded by cold takeout and spreadsheets, the numbers still wouldn't add up. Every adjustment I made only made the gap grow wider. 20 million in investment money, and somehow 2 million had simply evaporated. The next morning, Clara was radiant. She breezed into the office in a tailored navy suit, phone pressed to her ear, laughter echoing down the glass corridor. When she spotted me, she flashed that easy grin. "Morning, Daniel. You look like you fought the data demons all night." I wanted to tell her. I almost did. But something about her energy, a sharpness beneath the charm, stopped me. Instead, I handed her my summary report. "There are some discrepancies," I said carefully. "A few accounts don't match last quarter's entries." Her smile froze, just a fraction too long. "I'll review it later," she said, setting the folder aside like it was a used napkin. Then, with a quick subject change, "How's your weekend looking? I might need you on site for the investor prep." That was the first red flag, avoidance wrapped in authority. The second came later that afternoon. I overheard two of my colleagues, Jenna and Rob, whispering near the coffee machine. "Clara moved the meeting again," Jenna said. "Only the directors this time, no analysts." "She's been weird lately," Rob murmured. "Like she's hiding something." When they noticed me, they went silent. Rob smiled awkwardly. "Hey Dan. You're close with Clara, right? Everything okay upstairs?" I forced a laugh. "Yeah, sure. Just busy quarter-end stuff." But their eyes lingered, searching for answers I didn't have. That night, I checked the audit logs again. One of the financial reports, the same one I'd flagged, had been modified remotely just an hour after I left the office. The user ID matched Clara's. I stared at the timestamp. 11:47 p.m. She'd told me she was home by 10. Red flag number 3. Still, I didn't want to believe it. Clara had been my mentor, my ally in a cutthroat company. She'd defended me when upper management wanted to cut staff last year. She'd believed in me when no one else did. So I buried the unease. Told myself I was imagining things. People work late all the time, right? But the next morning when I reached for my laptop, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The USB drive she'd given me wasn't where I'd left it. And on my desk, a sticky note in her handwriting. Let's keep things between us. C. The sticky note sat on my desk like a whisper I couldn't unhear. Let's keep things between us. Between us. I didn't know if she meant loyalty or threat, but I knew suddenly that it wasn't just about numbers anymore. That morning, Clara called me into her office again. She was composed, radiant as ever, but her eyes darted toward the glass wall before lowering the blinds. The air in the room thickened instantly. Daniel, she began softly, I got your message about the discrepancies. I appreciate your diligence. Her tone was smooth, rehearsed. But here's the thing, sometimes, for the company's good, we need to present a unified story to the board. I blinked. A unified story? The data's off by millions, Clara. That's not a story, that's fraud. Her smile didn't waver, but her voice sharpened. Don't use that word. You're still learning how this level of business works. Optics matter more than accuracy. If the investors lose confidence now, everyone loses. Your team, your job, your reputation. She paused, letting the words hang. Then she added, quieter, and maybe even your future here with me. That stung more than I wanted to admit. For 2 years, she'd made me feel seen, valued, in a company that chewed up honest people and spat them out. But now I saw it. The warmth was calculated. Every latte, every late-night pep talk. It had all been grooming. She'd been shaping me into her shield. When I refused to nod along, her expression turned cold. I need your finalized report by Monday, she said. Aligned with my numbers. No exceptions. That weekend, I couldn't sleep. I went through every audit log, every transaction trail. And then, buried deep inside the research partner account, I found it, a shell company. Monroe Consulting, LLC. Her name. Her signature. Her siphoning money into her own firm through fake contracts. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was personal. She'd used my audit credentials to authorize the transfers. If this went public, I wouldn't just lose my career, I'd go down with her. I remember sitting in the dark, laptop glow flickering across my face, heart hammering like I'd swallowed lightning. My mentor. My ally. My friend. She hadn't chosen me. She'd chosen to use me. When Monday came, I printed everything, every forged trail, every falsified transaction, and locked it in my briefcase. That morning, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. The confusion was gone. The ache was gone. All that was left was resolve. And as I headed into the office, I knew one thing for certain. If Clara wanted to play with fire, she was about to find out how hot honesty burns. The morning I planned to expose Clara Monroe was the morning she vanished. She didn't show up for the executive briefing. Her phone went straight to voicemail. By noon, her office was empty. Desk cleared, laptop gone, even the framed photo of her dog missing. It was like she'd evaporated into thin air. At first, I thought maybe she'd panicked, taken a day off to prepare her defense. But when IT told me her credentials had been deactivated overnight, my stomach dropped. She'd run. And worse, she'd left the wreckage behind with my name on it. When I opened the company's internal memo, my hands shook. Pending investigation into irregularities within the finance department, it read. Lead auditor Daniel Reyes placed on temporary leave. The world around me blurred. My throat closed. I couldn't breathe. All the years I'd spent building trust, guarding my integrity, gone in a single sentence. I sank into my chair, staring blankly at my reflection in the black computer screen. The office outside buzzed with whispers I couldn't hear. That night, I sat alone in my apartment surrounded by piles of printed reports, coffee cups, and the ghost of my own disbelief. The city outside glowed like nothing had changed, but everything inside me had cracked. I kept replaying every moment with Clara, her kind words, her mentorship, the way she'd said, "We're a team, Daniel. I'll always have your back." That line twisted like a knife. At some point, exhaustion took over. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up to a memory. My father's voice, steady and sure. "Son, the truth doesn't need defending. It just needs someone brave enough to stand behind it." I sat up, heart pounding. My father had died 2 years ago, but in that moment, it was like he was right there, reminding me who I was before Clara made me doubt it. I opened my laptop again, this time with purpose. I traced every digital footprint, every hidden email chain. I found her personal backups synced to the cloud, dummy invoices, falsified signatures, even a draft message to the CEO framing me for procedural negligence. The rage burned away the fear. I realized then that Clara hadn't destroyed me. She'd exposed what I was capable of. The quiet ones, the honest ones, the ones who play by the rules. We only break when we've got nothing left to lose. And I had nothing left. I closed the laptop, slid the USB with her crimes into my pocket, and whispered into the empty room. "You can run, Clara. But I'm going to find you. And when I do, I'll make the truth louder than your lies." I learned quickly that revenge isn't a scream, it's an operation. It's patience, paperwork, and 1,000 tiny polite deceptions stitched into one unmistakable rope. Lock down the facts. I became nocturnal, trading sleep for logs. I taught myself the forensic language of our systems. Checksum trails, IP hops, cloud sync fingerprints. I cross-referenced timestamps with CCTV elevator swipes, expense approvals with personal calendars, and the shell company's bank routing with vendor portals. Every forged invoice Clara had used left a microscopic fingerprint. I found them like constellations. Build allies who owed nothing to Clara's charm. Jenna and Rob were easier than I expected. Frightened, embarrassed, but honest. I pulled them into a quiet corner of a coffee shop and laid out pieces of the puzzle, not to gossip but to arm them. "If this goes wrong, they'll burn you to make the blaze look accidental," I told them. Their faces hardened. They remembered the night she'd praised them. Now they had reasons to return the favored legal insurance. I made contact with an old law professor of mine who now did corporate compliance work. I didn't call it revenge. I called it due process. He taught me how to package evidence so a regulator would take it seriously. Chain of custody, certified prints, corroborating emails. When you want the system to do the work for you, you have to feed it a diet it understands. Bait the bird that thinks it's already flown. Clara's arrogance was her weakness. She loved control more than money. She'd left sloppy traces of that hubris, a private inbox, a tax consultant who still used her old voicemail, a vanity LinkedIn post about new consulting horizons. I crafted a plan that would play on her ego, a supposed investor who loved her vision and wanted a final private run-through. The goal wasn't confrontation, it was to get her to surface. Tactically, I did 3 quiet things that made all the noise later. I anonymized copies of the clean forensic package and ceded one to a reputable financial journalist with a reputation for immune objectivity. I uploaded a shadow copy to a secure regulator portal with a burner identity tied to an offshore email. I created a single traceable breadcrumb, a forged but plausible invoice that, if altered further, would point not at me but at Monroe Consulting. Throughout it all, I learned to speak in a different cadence. Where I'd once flinched, I measured. Where I'd once trusted smiles, I recorded them. I stopped being the naive auditor and started being an architect. Clara, by all outward signs, reclined somewhere safe, confident the game was over. Her vanity posts kept coming. Her network messages were full of plans. She was enjoying the silence she'd earned. The last piece clicked into place late one night as I stared at a drafted email. Subject line prepped, attachment sealed, recipients queued, the kind of email that would set a boardroom spinning and a newsroom sprinting. I hovered my finger over send and felt the old fear pulse through me. Then I thought of my father's voice and of every honest night I'd ever kept. I hit send. Somewhere across the city a phone buzzed, a message lit up, and the quiet began to break. Something big was about to explode. When the first email went out, it felt less like a single act than a series of meticulously stacked dominoes. I didn't send a rant, I sent a portrait, each piece of evidence a brushstroke. The shell company invoices, the signed contracts to Monroe Consulting, time-stamped edits from Clara's account, the CCTV elevator logs, the tax consultant's voicemail where she confirmed payment details. I addressed it to 3 recipients who could not be ignored. The board, the regulatory unit, and Aisha Khan, the journalist I'd chosen because she hates flashy headlines and chases facts like a bloodhound. Within an hour, my inbox went from quiet to a choir. Aisha replied, "On my way." The regulator's case number pinged back like the first bell of a trial. The board scheduled an emergency session. Clara had taken the bait. The investor meeting I'd created, an invite stitched together from her ego and her habits, drew her out of hiding. She arrived at the boutique hotel bar with a practiced composure, phone in hand, sunglasses like armor. She expected whispers of admiration, not accusations. She expected control. Instead, her arrival lit the room. Aisha was already there, calm, a recorder tucked like a secret into her palm. Jenna and Rob sat in shadowed booths, faces stone. My law professor watched from a corner, dossier open, while a regulator's representative, crisp in a suit that looked like consequence, waited at the bar. When Clara's phone buzzed with the first public notification, the regulator had opened an inquiry and the board had frozen executive accounts pending investigation, something in her unspooled. She read the headlines on her locked screen, then looked up. For the first time in my memory, her smile faltered. "What is this?" she asked, voice both small and furious. Aisha stood and spoke like a bell. "Miss Monroe, we have copies of invoices paid to Monroe Consulting, signed by you. We have authorizations using Mr. Reyes's credentials. We have bank routing and time-stamped edits." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The room leaned in. Clara tried the old moves: charm, denial, blame. She accused me of planting evidence. She accused the board of politics. She accused the city of wearing the moon wrong. But each accusation slid off the file folder Aisha opened. Emails with her drafts, her consultation receipts, the voicemail inadvertently saved under her name. Security escorted her to a private room to clarify matters. The regulator asked for ID. Her phone, once an instrument of manipulation, became a noose when it synced notifications from clients, consultants, and a message from the CEO demanding an explanation. Her network evaporated in live time as colleagues who had once toasted her success received the same packet I'd sent and felt the ground shift. Outside the hotel, newsroom alerts multiplied. Online, the story spread like spilled mercury, reflective, impossible to grab. At HavenTech, board members who had once deferred to her now watched conference calls where her accounts were frozen, contracts rescinded, and legal counsel advised separation pending inquiry. The justice that followed was not loud or theatrical. It was procedural, precise, and devastating in its dignity. Assets were frozen. Contracts were voided. Her consultancy facade collapsed under audit. People she'd cultivated for appearances stopped returning calls. The meetings that had celebrated her were replaced by meetings that catalogued losses. I watched the live feed from my apartment, hands still from shock and something like relief. On the screen, Clara's face flickered, composed 1 second, hollow the next. She searched the crowd for allies and found none. Her pins and speeches that once made her untouchable were now footnotes in a packet marked evidence. When the final segment ended, the studio cut to black and there was a sound I hadn't heard in months. Silence. Not the empty kind that scares you, but the heavy, full silence of a lie collapsing under its own weight. I rested my head back and let the quiet sit with me. Justice wasn't loud. It was inevitable. And in that calm, I felt something close to absolution, and the first, small ember of peace. You said. 3 months after Clara Monroe's downfall, HavenTech was a different world, quieter, humbler, stripped of its glassy arrogance. The board had issued a statement about a breach of ethical standards, without ever mentioning her name, but everyone knew. Her empire of charm and numbers had crumbled faster than anyone thought possible. She'd lost everything. The position, the company stock, the consulting firm she built on stolen money. Her accounts were frozen, her license revoked, and her network scattered like dust in a boardroom draft. The last I heard, she was living somewhere on the coast, avoiding cameras, fighting lawsuits she couldn't afford. It wasn't joy I felt when I heard it. Not really. More like quiet justice. The kind my father would have believed in. I went back to work after the regulators cleared my name. The same desk, the same view of the skyline. But I wasn't the same man who once thought integrity was a quiet thing. I learned it can roar when it has to. The funny part. People who used to avoid me in the hallways now stopped by to talk. They said words like bravery and honor, like I was some kind of hero. But I didn't feel heroic. Just free. One afternoon, Jenna dropped by my office with 2 coffees, caramel lattes, Clara's old order. For a second, the smell hit me like a ghost. She smiled gently. "Guess some things never change," she said. "Maybe not," I replied. "But people do." That night, I walked home through the city, the same streets I'd trudged through in shame months earlier. The neon reflections rippled across the puddles, and for the first time, I didn't see guilt staring back. I saw resilience. I paused outside a small cafe window and caught my reflection. The dark circles under my eyes were gone. My shoulders didn't sag anymore. I looked like a man who'd survived something brutal, and somehow, come out cleaner. And I realized something then. Clara's greatest lie wasn't in her spreadsheets or her shell companies. It was the story she told people like me, that honesty was weakness, that loyalty was leverage. She believed deception was power. But truth has a longer half-life. She taught me that. As I turned away from the window, the city lights flickered like data across a screen. Bright, brief, and beautifully transparent. Justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it just wears patience. And when it finally arrives, it doesn't shout. It whispers. "You were right to tell the truth." Have you ever trusted someone who turned out to be hiding something? Broken heart. Tell me your story in the comments. I read every one. And if you love stories where karma hits back harder than any lie, backhand index pointing right, subscribe for the next revenge story.